I, I see the argument, and fortunately for us, there's kind of been a culture surrounding coffee of it having a downside in regard to hydration and fluid balance. So, in a sense, the problem has already been presented culturally. And I would argue the doctors also kind of help us a little bit in saying, well, you should probably cut down your coffee consumption and drink more water and improve your hydration. We're kind of like, why don't you just drink a different coffee and improve your hydration?
I love that because you're right. I mean, most of coffee is water for the most part. However, like you said, you're getting that dehydration aspect of it. So drinking better and different coffee is exactly what people need because we need more different and we need more things that, we need options for people.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And even on that front, what I heard this recently, it's as if the beverage section is becoming the new vitamin or supplement section of the store
Mm,
because it really is this sense in which every drink is starting to move in the direction of it has a function or it's not going to sell.
right.
And so if your beverage doesn't have a function, then the question becomes, why are you drinking it? And I think generally people are moving away from the pure mouth pleasure that you get from sugary soda, as an example,
Mhm.
and moving more toward, well, how will I feel after I drink this?
Yeah. I mean, look at Olipop. They're doing, not only is it a soda, but it's good for your gut health. It's actual, like, very little to no sugar. It's a better cola for you. But, like you said, it's not just for that mouthfeel. You get good gut biomes for it as well.
Exactly. Yeah, they are a great example, and they're a pretty recent company, but
Hmm.
they're giving people what they need.
And what was the last person that challenged the soda market? No one. Like, not that you can ever think of. And then look what they've done. And you're seeing that market just absolutely go crazy.
Exactly. And I mean, there's a reason Warren Buffett was such a avid investor in Coke. There was
Mhm.
no competition. Now, maybe that's called into question.
Yeah. I mean, I think we are luckily entering a world now where the big, these giant corporations are getting challenged by other people, and we're seeing the spaces get bigger in local grocery stores. Obviously depending on which grocery store you go to is depending on how big that area is going to be. Like, we'll go back to when we were growing up. I imagine the coffee area was just kind of blended in with the breakfast cereals and so forth, and there wasn't a whole bunch of options. Now there's a whole aisle just for coffee, and that's just the ones that you're seeing in a grocery store, let alone you go to a farmer's market, you've got at least three or four different coffee people there. Online is a gigantic, it's almost too much to take in because you got to do all the research of where they're getting the beans, how they're doing the process, how are they roasting it, how close to me are they? So, you are the only one in your market, and it's a lot easier for people to do research on, hey, I love coffee, but I also love being hydrated. Why can't I just have not both of them together?
Exactly. The perfect marriage made in coffee.
So you said you like to kind of do biohacks when it comes to, obviously that's how you got here with the coffee. What are some other things that you see going forward now that you've done this? How do you see the coffee getting even better, not only flavor wise, but what it can do and help with people's bodies?
Yeah, there's a variety of trends, I would say, that are kind of, I guess you could say it's kind of trying to make any product kind of a cover all bases sort of deal.
Mm,
So, I mean, Super Coffee was a good example, right? They were trying to be your coffee and be your breakfast. So
yeah.
they were kind of taking that approach. Olipop, like you said, they're trying to be your soda and your yogurt. And I think that's kind of a good framework as far as a general trend. It's kind of you see these different silos and functions that they're existing in, and then the products that are coming out of those is the combining of the silos that can find a way to work together. And so I think it's finding what those similar to any business partnership, right?
Hmm.
Finding a functional partnership where two things work well together and you can find a way to mesh it and everybody wants it.
Oh, you're buzzing.
Oh, sorry about that.
You're totally fine. It's okay. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like you
right,
said, I do believe that we're starting to have more of a almost Venn diagram of I like this and I like this, but how am I putting them together? And oh, these things actually work really well together. What more can we find out in the world or in business that, either isn't being tapped into or that is, and maybe we can modify it to make it even a little better.
exactly. Exactly. Because you always have both the incremental changes that are improving over time, and then you
Hmm.
have the more exponential changes, which are more leaps than they are steps, right?
Right.
The question of both are important, but it's going to be interesting to see how each develop and where that all goes.
Right. So, what is kind of some of the feedback and that you've gotten while you're out, pitching the coffee, and then once people actually have the coffee and it's gone through their body and they've actually felt the hydration and not just the slug of being dehydrated. What are some of the kind of feedback you've gotten from people about this?
So some of the feedback is a general more stable energy. So that's one of the biggest pieces that we've seen and was kind of an initial idea of, well, everybody's getting jittery because they're drinking too much coffee. What if that didn't actually happen?
Hmm.
So if you're accounting for the effects that caffeine will have on its own and trying to consider what that's going to result in, and if those downsides can then be mitigated, that's been a lot of the responses. So the lack of jitteriness, this more stable, longer term, more focused energy without the crash has been some of the biggest pieces. And also another piece that I've thought has been interesting has been people who have had our coffee, gone through a bag, and then felt like they needed to stay on it because then when they would go back to their other coffee, they would have headaches or other things. And so I have a lot of curiosities, even surrounding the like pathophysiology of the effects of caffeine with electrolytes and caffeine without electrolytes. It's a topic that intrigues me a fair bit to understand, not only from the anecdotal, but also from biochemically, how does this actually work?
What is some of the biggest things that you have learned when it comes to that you maybe didn't, you may have had some kind of idea when you first started, but once you actually fully got in the research, you're like, whoa, wow, this is, way more than I thought it was going to be.
Definitely. So I, I tend to enjoy what sound like contrarian viewpoints, but are not really that controversial in a way. So one thing that I found that I thought was interesting is water retention is not necessarily a bad thing.
Hmm.
And there's this connotation that water retention is bad because of some demographics and health conditions that it can be a problem for. However, with sodium and its function in the body, the goal of sodium is to actually help efficiently use the water in the body rather than just get rid of it. And so that was one big thing, was looking into the upsides of sodium, because that's also been an electrolyte that's been in some ways unfairly maligned. I think there's some demographics and some health conditions that can still be a concern surrounding, but there seems to be a fair bit of research pointing in maybe we've overblown the problem of this white crystal with salt and underblown the white crystal that is sugar and the effects that that has on health. And so that's been a big chunk of what I found to be pretty interesting regarding uh, what I've looked into, what I've seen as far as a general trend or leaning toward the importance of a particular electrolyte, because that was one that was definitely avoided like the plague in the past.
No, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, it is so interesting that how the I mean, we're still trying to figure out how the body works, and it's been how many years now? And so like we're it's wonderful to see somebody else looking at it and saying, like you said, just the biohackness of it all. Like, what can we do here? How do we make it better? And, obviously making it better for people to enjoy on a regular basis as well.
Definitely. And it's bringing all those pieces together that
Hmm.
makes it a long-term solution rather than just a short-term idea.
Right. So you were in ballet, which I imagine you have so many fantastic stories about being in the ballet because that is not easy, not only in your body but your feet and your lower extremities in general. How were you kind of using coffee almost as a crutch for this extra bit of energy that which I imagine you wish you had your coffee now doing it back then, but how much I guess would you consume on a regular, like maybe show day or practice day?
Yeah, so I would typically consume 3, 4 cups.
Okay.
That was my typical. Actually, post ballet, I've ramped up a fair bit because my schedule has gotten more demanding in some ways.
uh,
Not more physically demanding, but I do also have children, so there's also that piece that it's like, well, the workday is done and the next part of the workday begins. Obviously, that part is much more laid back and more about the spending time. But all that said, I've really ramped up some of it because I also think that with the right combination of things, caffeine is generally a net positive. And there's a fair bit of research now that I think is pointing to that because that's also been a controversial question surrounding how much is too much. And I'm of the opinion at this point where if you account for the mitigation of the downsides of it, the upsides of it are that much greater. And so I think in the past, yeah, if I would have had my coffee, I might have been a little more spry during the
okay.
long days. And I wasn't as health conscious back then.
Right.
Uh, there was a period of time where I definitely ate ice cream for breakfast or a Snickers for breakfast. But as with all of us, always learning, always trying to improve, and
Mhm.
then coming back and trying to keep up with those who are still doing it professionally. That's when it actually came in handy. It's like, well, you all do this every day still. I'm retired, but
Right.
I'll take my edge where I can on the biohacking side to keep up.
So when it came to entering the market when it comes to how your bags are going to look, like you said, getting a logo, figuring out what you need to have on the package, and just all of that. What has been some of the things you've really learned? Because, like you said, coming from ballet, this is, a whole new world for you. What is some of the things that you learned when it came to just market side in general?
Yeah, so after ballet, I did have a landscaping company where I focused on landscape design.
Okay.
And with that, I had some sense of business. I ran that for about 4 years. So that
Oh,
was at least
nice.
helpful coming in. So I wasn't just straight from ballet, straight into a business. It was more so a ramp up. And landscaping was one other thing that I knew how to do growing up. And ballet is not the most profitable career path.
Right.
So that's why landscaping ended up being where I went when some injuries and physical challenges with the way ballet will just beat you up otherwise came up. So that was kind of the bridge to this piece of the career side. And then a lot of it really also came down to people I knew and just mentorship. And I had a good friend actually from who I danced with his wife, who was in the startup world. And so he was very helpful in giving guidance as well as what this process could look like, as he'd been involved in a couple of startups already at that time. So It was kind of a combination of having a little business